So now it's time for us to move into our featured guest speakers for today's events. We will be broadcasting this via Zoom. So for those of you joining us through Zoom, we thank you for spending part of your day with us. All virtual participants' mics will be muted. However, we have someone monitoring the chat box. So please place your questions in that chat box. We'll be sure that they are addressed at the end of each of our speakers' presentation. So our first speaker today is Mr. Gavin. We are honored to have him joining us today. Gavin is the Director of Technology for Madison County Schools, where he has served for the past 11 years. At Madison County, he manages a staff of 19 and supports 19,000 student and faculty devices, 600 interactive panels, 450 voice-over IP phones, 1,400 printers, 1,200 access points, and 150 hotspots, and too many switches to even count. His department also provides technology training for teachers and staff on the use of that equipment. Prior to working for Madison County Schools, Gavin served in varying capacities at Jackson Public Schools, was an adjunct professor for Holmes Community College, and ran a small IT consulting company. In his free time, he enjoys time with his family, turning wood on his lathe and watching MSU baseball. Gavin, do you mind taking a moment to address us? Thank you. There's a water if you need it.
Thank you. I found something really fun here. See if I can figure this out. My name is Gavin. Again, the Director of Technology for Madison County Schools. I'm excited to talk to you guys today, but I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I might get a little fiery and a little angry because I'm going to talk about something that to this day still makes me angry. And we're 4 years removed from it. Okay, so I apologize ahead of time, and I'm going to try to keep my language appropriate for those that are watching via Zoom. Is there a clicker or anything? How do I advance? Does somebody want to advance for me? It's touchscreen. Give you a little background. October 2017, we had about 6,000 MacBooks that went to high school students and every faculty member. About 3,500 Chromebooks, 3,000 Windows machines, combination between XP and Windows 7, 23 physical sites, and we have voice over IP district-wide. That's important, and we'll talk about that in a second. And I've got some stars here because in 2017, I thought we were secure. This was the old model, right? We had traditional firewall, nothing fancy, just in, out. Can you get in? Can you not? We had traditional signature-based antivirus. You notice how those go. We're going to download those every night. And all the zero-day exploits we're not going to take care of. And then basic Office 365 spam filter. We weren't doing anything fun with attachment detonation or scanning links or anything like that. Just a basic spam filter. Now, next. All right. Something happened. I'm going to tell you a little story. My little girl's in the 6th grade. I'm dropping her off at the middle school, and I get a call from the lab teacher saying that all of their Windows machines were spontaneously restarting. Now, y'all know what happens on Patch Tuesday. Everything gets updated, and invariably there's a patch somewhere that goes awry. So I get out of the car, I go in the lab, and I'm thinking I'm going to fix this, right? So I'm sitting down, I get another phone call. I have another lab, another middle school, spontaneously restarting. So now I'm starting to get a little anxious, right? I'm starting to wonder what's going on. Now remember, I've got a whole bunch of Windows devices in my district at this point. I get a third call, another middle school lab, spontaneously restarting. Then I get the dreaded call from my sysadmin. Gavin, we've got a problem. I need you in the office. Servers are restarting. So I've got up here stages of grief. I don't know if you, probably everybody in this room has gone through grief. And if you've gone through it, you know you kind of go through the different cycles. You're going to go from anger to denial to depression. And at that point, I was in denial. I'm like, this is no big deal. There's something going on. It's not going to be a big deal. We're going to go to the office, figure it out. do a login script to fix this problem. We were back rocking and rolling. So I get to the office and we start digging, but basically what was happening was we were having a denial of service attack. Every Windows workstation in our domain was infected with 3 viruses: Emotet, which was the dropper, Quackbot, and TrickBot. Now, we actually got lucky because in October 2017, this is before Quackbot turned into an encryptor of data. At this point, it was just a Trojan to steal banking credentials. So we start shutting servers down, and then my finance office calls me and says, Gavin, somebody just tried to wire money out of our bank account into another account. Now, luckily, our bank caught it and didn't let that through. So I said, we're shutting it down. We shut the internet down. I talked earlier about voice over IP. So here we are shutting services down, and all of our voice traffic is no longer operational because I'm having to shut services down. We started trying to triage, trying to figure out what was going on. At this time, we're still somewhat in denial about the scope of this virus outbreak. Every workstation, and this is where I'm going to get angry. Yeah, again, I apologize ahead of time. We had a marker. Every workstation infected had a text file, and the only thing in that text file was Gem 15. And what was happening was on Monday, they would have a new variant specifically for our school district, okay, of Quackbot and TrickBot. I'd call our antivirus product up. I say, look, guys, it's not catching these viruses. What is going on? They say, well, you need to send us a copy of the virus, and we will find out why. We'll create a signature. And the next day, guess what? The Monday variant was cleaned. But on Tuesday, it was a Tuesday variant. We would literally have to go get another variant, send it off to the antivirus company. They would create an antivirus for it, signature. And on Wednesday, they would clean the Monday and the Tuesday variant. But then the Wednesday variant would hit us. Y'all, they had a better software delivery system than I did, that I paid for, because they could update 2,000 to 3,000 Windows workstations every single night. But yet when I'm trying to push a patch out, it takes days. They're brilliant. It's brilliant how they do this, right? So again, anger, lots of begging. I started begging, somebody help me. What are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this? So go back to anger. Let's go one more over. After we realized that we are just in trouble, we had to find a baseline. And we deployed a DNS filter and out in the cloud, right? So we ported everything in this DNS filter to figure out what in the world is going on. And this became our baseline as we began to clean the system up to make sure we're doing it right, okay? In 8 hours after we said, okay, we got to turn everything on because I really need to figure out how bad this is, we turned everything back on. Had over 40,000 command and control requests in an 8-hour period. We were just eaten alive, right? That became our measuring stick. The next thing we do is we go out and find a next gen AV solution. And I'm going to get angry again because we called that antivirus company that we were using at the time, and they informed me that they did have a next gen product that they would sell me. And I said, but wait a minute, if you're a security company, why are you not providing that period? Why are you selling a product that you may know does not clean up the 0-day attacks? I'll tell you all the answer to that one offline. So after we then deployed a next gen AV solution, and you can see here as we deployed that every single night, the command and control requests started dropping. Literally overnight, it cleaned us up, okay? A little anecdote here. On Friday, I got to go eat dinner for the first time in 3 weeks with my family. Now, remember, I have a 6th grader. And that night, she told me that as she is in class, of course, everybody knows that I'm the dad. And they asked her, what's going on? They were asking my 6th grader what was going on with the network. And she said, I love this. She's snarky. I don't know. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. Okay. So things we learned. I'm going to say, guys, that do as I say, not as I do, right? We felt like we were secure, and we obviously weren't. And I will tell you that even to this day, I wake up every day wondering what can we do differently to make us more secure. Anytime an application comes across my desk, I'm looking at it thinking, what problems will this introduce to the network from a security standpoint? All the time looking at our security posture now. So don't think you're safe. You're not. Even after you do everything that you think you can do, you're still not safe. Because again, they can deploy software to 3,000 workstations every single night. But yet the systems that we maintain and control have a hard time doing that. So don't think you're secure. Everyone is going to offer an opinion to help. I had a cousin that lived in California that basically wishes me a happy birthday once a year. That called me up and said, Gavin, what's going on? What is there a problem? Are you okay? Can I help? I'm thinking to myself, how in the world does this person over in California know anything about what's impacting me right now here in Madison, Mississippi? So everyone's going to come out and offer help. So if you're doing a DR plan, if you don't have one, you need to do one. If you have one, you need to edit it. Okay. And you need to identify your folks now, your vendors, your administration that you need to contact and communicate with, your staff. They're going to help you remediate a problem. Okay. You need to write those folks' names down. You need their addresses. So if it's 2 a.m. in the morning, you know where to go knock on the door. A colleague. And this is where I'm going to go kind of personal on this, okay? If you have a virus outbreak or an encryption event, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when. We always say that. But I go back to that grief thing. There's going to be a point where you doubt yourself and you get depressed. It's going to happen. So you need a colleague that has gone through what you're going through so that you can call them, so they can reassure you that when you are on the other side of this, you will be better off. Okay, you've got to have that colleague that you can call. If nothing more than to say, hey, Gavin, when you're done, let's go have a drink. Let's go have a beer and hang out. Okay, so I urge you to find a colleague that's gone through that. I'll be happy to help. Okay, a bouncer. We have this in our DR plan. And a bouncer's job is to keep people out. If you're in the middle of trying to triage an event and somebody comes in and sits in a chair who has nothing to do with your team trying to clean this system and sits down and says, hey, and you ask them, well, what are you doing here? And their comment is, well, this is just fascinating to me. This is cool to watch. I just want to watch. Guys, we are not a sideshow. We're not in a ring and people watching us. That is not it. So you need to have a bouncer to keep Joe Blow and everybody else out of the room while you fix the problem. Okay? PR is extremely important. And I'm going to say, own your message, even if that message is, I don't have a clue what's going on. If we were to do it again, I'm going to have our PR person, I hope on my watch, never go through this again. But I'm going to have the PR person sitting in the room with us just to observe what's going on, so that every night that person can tell the world what's going on. Because if you're in the middle of trying to fix a problem and you're also trying to communicate, what happens when you send everyone email? Everybody responds back, right? You can't begin to respond to all the individual emails that come to you and fix the problem. So you've got to have a PR person in the rooms, and every night they need to send a public announcement. If it's just, hey guys, we're still shut down, we're still working on it, right? We have our telephone system up today, so we've got part of the system operational, but we're still working on it. So you need to have that PR person. Layered security. I think somebody said earlier, if you think that one company can do it all, they're probably lying to you. We now have layered security. We've got cloud security, multiple pieces of cloud security. We've got edge perimeter security, layer 7 firewalls now, right? We have endpoint security. And we look at each of our systems, our VMs, our Azure, our Active Directory. We look at each one of those systems and secure that kind of individually. And we don't use the same company for everything. And, you know, and I know that there's some folks that enjoy that, have a single pane of glass, but my thought is if this virus can get through one company, maybe another company can stop it. Okay, so we lose some visibility sometimes when we do that, but we do have layered security now. Zero trust. I trust no one. Teachers, I love them to death. They without them, the world would not run. But they like to click links because of who they work with, right? Parents or community members are emailing teachers constantly. So we never know if this is a real parent or somebody trying to attack us, right? So, and all of our users are probably the same way. If they get a link, they're apt to click. So don't trust teachers regarding email, okay? I don't trust anybody, including myself, with anything in security. So zero trust is important. How to be careful with this one. Insurance company is not your friend. And what I mean is whenever we had this outbreak, everybody has to have cyber insurance. It's part of the business now. But whenever we called the insurance company to help us remediate this virus outbreak, they told us we had to scorch earth it. We had to erase Active Directory and start over. We had to create a separate domain, start over. We had to separate and segment our WAN and our internet circuits and basically create an entire new network. So instead of them wanting to help us fix the problem, they basically gave us what to them was the easy solution. To me, it was like, well, that's a no-brainer. We cannot do that. Again, how about hire a bouncer, own your communication. And again, when you're doing a DR plan, I urge you to not forget about the personal aspect of it. Identify a colleague, okay? And don't forget your family. If you got the Saturday, if you got a volleyball game on Saturday that your little girl is going to play, go to the game. Take a moment to go eat dinner with your family. I'm not kidding. For 3 weeks, I would get at the office around 7 a.m. and I would work till 9 and 10 o'clock at night when the 6th graders are asleep, right? So don't forget your family. We are all very task oriented, I know, and we want to get these networks up and running again because we own those networks, but you must not forget your family. So just to recap, remember, we're not secure. Write everybody who you think needs to be in your plan down, get their addresses, get their cell phone numbers, know their wives and their husbands' names. If you need to get them, you can. Trust no one. I can't stress the PR enough because you don't need to be the communicator. You need to have somebody doing that for you. You may want to do an executive summary every day so that let your administration know what's going on, because that way they're not bombarding you too, but they can know that you will personally give them an executive briefing every day. But for the public, let somebody else manage that communication. And y'all, don't forget your family. Okay, that is one of the things that I regret the most when we had this virus outbreak was I let my family suffer for that computer network. Okay. I told you I wouldn't need 30, 45 minutes. Guys, my name is Gavin Gwines. Do you have any questions at all? No? 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Where were you 3 or 4 years ago? Come on.
Goodness, thank you, Gavin. I mean, what a great experience to hear, to live through. I think one thing's all for certain, we all have lived your pain. I mean, you know what I mean. We all feel your pain. So we're in this together. We have to remember that. So thank you so much. All right, we're honored today to have Dr. Greg Price also join us. Greg is the Chief Technology and Security Officer at Troy University. Greg worked with the Alabama Attorney General's Office in 2006 and helped develop a program to promote online safety measures for Alabama's children. In addition to his work as an advocate for child safety, Greg serves as the Director of Alabama Digital Forensics Lab, 20-year member of the Pike County Board of Education, and is the author of numerous IT security books and cybersecurity articles. Greg has taught for the FBI, NCIS, Secret Service, and DoD. In 2011, he was named as the U.S. IT Security Practitioner of the Year. From 2013 through 2016, his security teams were named the top in the nation. As a cybersecurity engineer, Greg has several patents and holds scores of industry certifications. Please welcome Dr. Greg Price.
All right, good morning. So I can understand the anger from Gavin a few moments ago. I'll show a slide in just a moment that I don't think any of the vendors were at the conference I just left, where I did a lot of, well, there were a few, but it'll be interesting when you see the, hey, Perkins was there, that's right, David was there. So what I'm going to talk about today is pretty simple, but first we got to have a little image, a little pictorial here so you can understand who you can trust. You can always trust bald-headed dudes with beards and glasses if they're security people. They're typically, they've lost all their hair because they worry about these things and all of that. But this is my contact information. If you want to send me a question or whatever, just feel free to email me, and I'll do everything I can to get back up with you. All right, so quickly, I'm going to talk about sort of a statistical review of what happened in 2020 and part of 2021 from a cyber threat perspective and some key findings. There are a lot of studies that attempt to do this. So what I use 11 of the big ones and kind of create an amalgam of them. So some of the statistics will not exactly mirror perhaps what some of the vendors or maybe what some of you have seen, but it's a cross-reference of a much larger set. I'll talk about the kill chain very briefly, and then some top controls that can be used to mitigate hopefully a lot of these risks that I talk about as well. So probably the most requested thing from any of the presentations I do is this image. Those of you who watched Jurassic Park, you know the story. The fellow who built the park continuously said he spared no expense doing anything in the park, but for some reason they had one damn IT person running the entire facility, and that guy was a little upset. And anyways, that was pretty much the whole movie, was the upset IT guy and what he did to get out of there. But so from a statistical perspective, domestically here in the United States, over the past minute or so that I've been speaking, here are some of the bad things that have happened using some weighted averages. 45 new viruses, 200 new malicious websites, 180 identities stolen, 5,000 variants of malware released, of existing malware. $2 million was stolen, 1,440 unique vulnerabilities in homes, home networks continued to persist. And I'll make one comment about that in just a moment. And somebody became a millionaire probably by getting on TikTok and doing some outlandish stuff. But the 1,440 unique vulnerabilities, a lot of people weren't paying much attention to this until COVID became a big deal when we sent everybody home. We scanned some of our home networks at Troy, and it was obviously very concerning. Not that we needed to scan them to know that, because most people's home networks are ill managed and they're dirty and bruised up and all that. So we worked with a larger group that was conducting a nationwide study to try to determine just how bad are the home networks. The report was very revealing, but on average, home-based computing networks have 1,440 exploits that have not been patched. That's a lot of problems. And depending on how those people connect and bridge themselves into your environment, they may be bringing that dirty environment right into your protected and somewhat clean environment. So the COVID-19 situation has kind of underscored some of those opportunities. I think what was mentioned in the last presentation about the efficiency of some of the malware and how it seems to patch itself or update itself. I think some of the vendors would probably mention this, but that most likely, especially with Emotet, is polymorphic. It looks at what's going on and it rewrites itself in the midst of the activities that are attempting to break it. If Microsoft could do that, that would be fabulous. It would be disruptive to their business model, I think, but nonetheless, there are a lot of bad things happen in a moment. So from a modern cybersecurity perspective, what are the bad guys doing, the bad actors, or perhaps the would-be bad guys, and what's still working, and what's going on from where we're seeing coming on in the future? Well, what does a bad guy look like? Maybe I don't look like a bad guy to you. I think that what we typically are referred to, that the folks that are in the kind of the business that I am, are gray hat hackers. Maybe white hat hackers, depending on the day. I'll use these cowboy references, right? But for almost 30 years, I've been paid to break into networks and break into systems and stuff like that. So the bad guys, there's a sensationalized version of it, the Hollywood version, the media version, and they typically only want to latch onto the things that are very unique. And the notion of somebody sitting around in the basement with the lights out for some unknown reason and Metallica blaring, yeah, I guess there are some like that. Maybe 30 years ago when I still had hair and I had a ponytail, maybe I would have equated to that. But the bad guy can be anybody. It can be right there in your home. Those of you who are familiar with this IP schema, especially in the educational environment and the remote work environment, as I mentioned earlier, with all of the bad things that we see in our environments. But the idea that you need to be proficient and a good programmer or a good developer to hack something is certainly not the case. Here are a few screenshots of some tools that are readily available to anyone if you know how to locate them. These are not commercial tools. These are free tools that were developed by some really sophisticated bad guys, so to speak, and they're out there for public consumption. And used to, we would refer to people who use these things in kind of a derogatory fashion. We called them script kiddies. And during that time period, it was because the tools were not very robust. They would often break, and they were very noisy, and you could find them very quickly. But the tools are no longer underdeveloped or poorly developed. They're rather robust, and in some instances, there's some nation state actors that develop these things, and supposedly they accidentally release them to the internet and all those sorts of things. So anybody with some ill intention can become a bad guy. And in some cases, they don't even have to have ill will. They can be infected and inadvertently participate in some sort of command and control environment, things of that nature, and be an accidental bad guy. One of the tools that is somewhat popular, there's a commercial version of it, but there's still a free version of this product, Shodan. A lot of you are probably familiar with it. I used it this morning when I was updating a slide, and essentially Shodan is sort of a search engine, if you will, of public-facing IP addresses looking for vulnerabilities. So if you don't want to do the legwork, and the hardest part of the attack is the reconnaissance piece, building up and looking and trying to identify a target and find those weaknesses, there's a search engine that you can use to help you out with that. If you've never used Shodan, you might be terrified to visit it. Type in your network range and see what is logged there. That's a quick and free way to determine what might be going on in your environment and what the bad folks are seeing, so to speak. The screenshot there, it's obviously a Windows operating system, but you notice that it's in Chinese as in Mandarin. I randomly picked the first IP that came back when I looked for RDP and showed it this morning, and I clicked on it and launched a very simple routine, and I had the desktop of a machine that was in Taiwan, actually. I don't know what it was. I guess I could have spent some time and gotten into it, but I just needed to update the slide. That was the only reason I did it. So at the most recent conference I was at, which was yesterday, I had planned to do a live demonstration of an attack. Things kind of ran long, and there were some issues with the internet in the hotel, but I still did it. I just didn't present it. I presented something different. These are screenshots from that attack, and I have blanked out or redacted some of the key pieces to protect the people who would probably get very angry at me for showing this. But the hotel, the entire conference and convention center was not unlike anything that you would ordinarily experience. Wi-Fi everywhere. I mean, just constantly. People had their little Wi-Fi boxes with them. The hotel had access points scattered all over the place. There were some specific to the convention facility. And people will attach to those things without giving it much thought. And they certainly don't always understand or appreciate how they work and what goes on behind the scenes. So I just carried a little laptop with me into one of the areas and set up what's called an evil twin attack. And if you're in the networking world, you may be familiar with this and know what it is, but just from a very basic perspective, most wireless devices are hungry for a good radio signal. From an engineering perspective, they want a strong signal to attach to. So they have a preference rating for whatever's the strongest. So the idea behind the evil twin attack is find the signal that people, the SSID of the wireless network that people are using in an area. And if you're on the ground near people, impersonate it, and you're by default going to have the greater signal, and people will begin to attach to you. But you've got to do something to get them off of the signal that they're already using, and you can just do a little bit of a DDoS attack and bounce them, and then they attach to what you put there. So I was in the conference room, and there were around, I don't know, 600 people in there. I think that's right, around 600. And it was during the a little break, so I fired the thing up and kicked a few hundred people off Wi-Fi briefly. I knew it worked because people stopped looking at the table. They looked up and looked around, and you know what happened, right? So but then people started connecting to what they thought was the hotel wireless, but in fact it was the laptop I had with me. In the center, you can see I did a little screenshot from my telephone to show the other networks that were in the area, and then the one that I created, and created a captive portal that mimicked what the hotel presented if you ever lost internet access, so that it looked legitimate. They had to key in some information, which, you know, if I wanted to, I could have collected. And then I just started scanning traffic. That's what's in the lower left-hand corner. Why is this important to show? Well, several purposes. One, it's easy to do. There's nothing here that I had to do other than just go out and grab a few pieces of free software, set a laptop up properly, and just know how the stuff works. Secondly, the infrastructure is fragile, especially when there are people on the inside wanting to cause harm. And I can tell you from 3 decades of breaking into stuff, the only place I want to be is the inside. The idea of sitting on the outside and banging on the doors and being really noisy is ridiculous. If I get on the inside, most of the time, the network design and the security systems that populate the internal environment are horrible, because they're very worried about the edge. You know, sort of almost like the idea of putting up a fence around your yard or your property. Yeah, it's going to keep probably honest bad people out of the way, but somebody can climb through the fence. Then what are you going to do on the inside? So this was clearly one of those examples. The hotel was not doing anything looking for rogue access points or doing any sort of MAC address filtering or any of that sort of stuff, because I was using their hotel internet service to route people out as I was collecting information. Now, if I were truly evil or bad, I would have just started grabbing passwords and all that sort of stuff. But once again, I just needed some slide material. So launched the attack and set up this illustration. So I'm not doing that here. David told me, pick me up if I do something like that, and so we're.
Do you ever use laptop setup?
Yes, absolutely. So, those of you that are familiar perhaps with Kali Linux and those sorts of things, I mean, this is the heart of these tools. And used to, you would have to kind of live off the land and create these things by yourself and compile them and all that. But I mean, it's rare that anybody's doing that. So, email phishing, you can't have a presentation about cybersecurity threats without talking about phishing. Phishing is obviously easy to describe. You've got this mass scale, but that has kind of been reducing in volume since around 2017. And the bad folks are getting more specific with their attacks. And that's the reasons for that are simple, but tools are becoming more observant, and the configurations allow for a greater detection of mass messages coming in that are attempting to phish people. So we have this notion of spear phishing, which is a smaller subset of a large group of an organization that you want to go after. And then, you know, probably the more common now is this whaling, or sometimes it's called pretexting. You go after the big target, okay, or targets. So at my organization, some of the folks that are typically being sought most frequently is the chief financial officer, the chancellor of the university, people in IT and things of that nature. So as the specificity of the attacks increase, so do the fine tuning opportunities for these tools. And unfortunately, the end user training, the awareness stuff, it works to an extent, but people are still going to have some natural intrinsic issues. And one of those is curiosity. They just want to click on things. Plus, most people are just incredibly trusting. They don't want to believe that there are bad people out there that want to do bad things to them. So despite the training, the email and email phishing continues to be very popular. I always describe these as insider attacks. Is that my phone or somebody else's? Oh, okay, not mine. So I always describe any email attack as an insider attack. Why? Well, the recipient is inside the network typically, or they're a consumer or a user within the systems that you're managing. So by default, the activity is occurring on the inside of your environment, whether the footprint is, you know, the geographical footprint is not important. So if, as a bad guy, if I want to be inside, using the email is a great opportunity for me to get in there quickly. Social engineering is still the #1 thing that most bad guys use, because you can trick people, you can impersonate people, all those kinds of things. Those work really well. The second most popular method to gain entry in statistically is a web browser. You see that obviously with phishing, but typically accompanies a phishing attack. Is it an attachment that's going to explode and do all kinds of crazy stuff? No. Tools now can scan those things and detect them and pull them over into a sandbox and quarantine them and all that. It's a URL. And you get somebody to click on that URL, and then the bad activity can start to occur and all those sorts of things. So email, the phishing needs to be considered an internal attack. Here's some statistics. Small and medium-sized businesses account for the largest number of breaches, around 30%. Still, users who have gone through 3 years of end user security awareness training and phishing attempts within their environment, nearly 40% continue to fall victim during the exercises. Even when they're told we're about to do a phishing attempt, around 40% of them will still click on everything that pops up in front of them. 84% of small and medium-sized businesses are targeted by phishing. Why? It's very effective. New phishing site launches approximately every 20 seconds. That came from GoDaddy, so I'm not entirely certain how confident I am with that statistic, but 3/4 of all phishing websites use encryption. That's a good one to talk about. I'm not going to elaborate on it, but those of you who are talking to vendors, sometimes the ability to see inside HTTPS traffic is a challenge, depending on, honestly, that's a budget issue in many instances. And nearly 100% of malware is delivered via email. The remaining 6% approximately are these things. USB thumb drives. I know they're still popular, people use them, but if we're doing a physical security audit of a facility and I can't get in, if I can't get anybody to click on stuff and I can't get them to respond to any of the weird nefarious things I've got going on from the outside, I just walk around the parking lot dropping USB keys. They don't work if they're just USB keys. They have to sort of convey a sense of urgency. And of all the things I've tried, the one thing I can do with a thumb drive that gets me nearly 100% utilization is to put a little sticker on it that simply says, "My porn." Not a joke. It happened every time. We were working on a bank in the southeast part of Alabama, and we could not get into this bank. I mean, we had tried everything. So the last resort, we did the thumb drive drop with this pornography stuff on it. We had, or supposedly, and we had written a little program on the thumb drive that would auto launch and send us some information from the PC if they inserted the thumb drive. I did not get out of the parking lot before we started getting responses. So, you know, just this natural, this human instinctive thing creates some issues. So the idea is an insider attack. I've talked about this. What are people going after? When we look at the motives, the number one motive without a doubt is cash. I want your money, whether it's data that I can convert somehow into currency, or if you have an enormous volume of things that might be worthy or worth something to someone, the end result is typically cash. The media is sometimes will portray these things as being politically motivated and all of that. Yeah, that happens, and you know, people get upset, disgruntled employees leave, and maybe they try to do some harm, but by far, high into the 90%, it's all about the cash. Ransomware is continuing to be a problem. In 2020, we saw over 100% increase year over year. Insurance companies are fed up with paying ransoms. I know the speaker next is going to talk about cyber liability insurance. I'm not going to speak a lot about that, but the actuarial data and things that finally kind of caught up with the insurance industry, and they're aware that cyber liability insurance isn't exactly a great product to offer in many instances. It used to be trivial to get it. A little one-page application, pay the premium, and you were good to go. Now, if you have it, I know the application I fill out every year for hours at the university is almost 50 pages now. And it's a simple yes/no thing. If you check yes on any of those boxes, the underwriters are going to score you badly, and you're probably not going to get coverage. So it's sort of like the credit card companies and credit card theft. They don't want to pay for that, so they have some interesting regulatory requirements. The average ransom payout in the first quarter and the second quarter of 2021 was almost $200,000. The industries that continue to be hit the most in order of likelihood: healthcare, government, transportation, and service providers. Healthcare is obvious in the United States because there are a lot of data there that are worth a lot of money, whether it's the patient information, insurance billing information, credit card information, whatever. It's just a treasure trove of data in the healthcare environment. And the hackers or bad guys often use RDP to get in. You know, if you're using remote desktop, stop, especially from the outside in. If it goes straight in, I mean, the Shodan search that I did earlier ought to scare you if you've got that set up. There are some simple ways to deal with that if you need that type of activity to manage or something, or let people work from the house. Just opening up a port on the firewall and letting them in is not that way. But it's odd how people continue to do that, or why. Average company size of ransomware victims, 625 employees. The median is 62. Now, it's important because the math can sometimes be confusing in these surveys that are presented. Average is the total number divided by the number of incidents divided by the total number of employees. The median is if you take a look at the top of that and average it out. So the companies that are typically hit with this are small businesses. And once again, you don't have to read all these studies and know why. It's opportunistic. They typically don't have a lot of spend on IT. They're not very sophisticated, so they're easy targets. I think on this little graphic here, the scariest thing to me is the one on the right. Hacked small and medium-sized businesses, nearly two out of three of them are typically out of business within 6 months if they've been successfully breached. They can't afford to operate any longer, not only from a cash perspective, but there's a trust issue. There's this integrity piece where the customers perhaps feel betrayed, or they can no longer put their trust with them because their data has been stolen or lifted or what have you. Attack vector by company size. The only one we're seeing going down is RDP. That's good. I guess people, come to presentations like this, or they listen to vendors that have very good advice, and they've begun to turn that stuff off. Unfortunately, the others, the phishing's continuing to rise, software vulnerabilities. The software vulnerability is not going to go away. The key pieces of software that we use in most businesses nowadays, those folks are not going to stop and do a rewrite. That's not going to happen. I hear people talk and complain about that all the time. Why doesn't Microsoft just completely rewrite the operating system? No, they're not going to do that. I mean, I think they proved that when they said 2.5 years ago, it's no longer, we're not going to version these things. It's just Windows. What comes out on October the 4th or 5th? Windows 11. They changed their cadence on that, their position on it, simply because they don't want to give the impression that it's something brand new. It's just the latest iteration of it, and rewriting all that stuff would be just an incredible challenge. So patching is going to be here for a long time, and if you're not patching in a proper fashion, that's presenting opportunities for all sorts of bad things. 98% of all payments are successfully processed in ransomware. 97% of that 98% recover their data. That's actually it's an interesting statistic. I'm not going to say it's encouraging or good, because that would seem like I'm endorsing bad behavior. But if we want to try to be as optimistic as possible, I guess the bad guys are operating a good business model. Is that a way of describing it? I don't know. 3% just, they paid the ransom and the bad guys were really bad. They didn't give them their data back. The average number of days for a ransomware attack lasts is typically 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It happens rather quickly. Once the detonation occurs, and depending on what defenses are in place, it can be nearly instantaneous. Those 2 weeks are usually legal people getting involved, insurance people getting involved, C-level people getting involved, and a whole lot of people shouting and hollering and sweating and all that sort of stuff. And then the FBI will show up. Now, I've worked with the FBI for a long time, and I can tell you 2 things about the FBI with any sort of cyber incident. One, they are not there to fix anything. That is a huge misunderstanding by most businesses. They think if they call the FBI when there's some sort of cyber incident, the FBI is going to rally a group to come in and start triage and mitigating and fixing things. They will show up, but they show up to document, observe, and then they want to go look for a criminal. They're not there to fix anything. And the second thing is, they will always, without exception, tell you, do not pay the ransom. That's the official stance for any of these things for the U.S. government, is don't pay the ransom. They know that in most cases, and according to this study, 98% of the cases, the ransom's going to be paid. You got to get your stuff back, right? Typically, if you're in this situation and you feel compelled to deal with the ransom, you're going to pay it because you have no other alternative. Here's a piece of information that I think I talked about this, maybe, I don't know if it was at this event or event sponsored by Howard about 5 years ago, but the comment was, the bad guys that are running the ransomware operations, they're running it as a business. They get in there, they detonate the stuff, and then they hold you hostage, and you pay them, and that's the end of it. That's not the case. That's not what we're seeing any longer. What we're seeing is, once they gain entry, they want persistence. They want persistent opportunity to regain entry. The ransomware is what they deploy when they're leaving. And they do that so that you are aware that they were there and they can get some cash out of you in a hurry. The second step of what they plan has yet to come. So in some environments that we've reviewed, we found all sorts of horrible things happening in the environment where, I think the term that's used frequently is back doors were opened and things of that nature. But in one municipal environment that I worked at last year, The back door, if you will, that was deployed right before the ransomware was detonated was all of the backups for that city environment were contaminated with an application to allow them to continue to steal data from them. And it was very horrible what they had to do. They had a horrible, a really poor backup strategy. They had one way that they were backing up. It was disk to disk, pushing it to the cloud, and they expunged the data every night that was on the local disk. They had no backups. None of their data was clean. So they found themselves in a horrible situation that there was no remedy for. They couldn't trust their own data, even though they had it back. So this idea of full network compromise is becoming more popular. And obviously, they're just wanting to steal things and maintain some sort of persistence. How do you deal with it? Well, here's a popular term, weapons grade data backups. The vendors here that are advocates and suppliers of backup tools will enjoy hearing this, but that's really the only tool you've got to have some notion of sophistication and absolute and being able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I mean, once you've fallen over and you're cracked, if you can't reassemble the environment, that's bad. And I know you're being told to bare metal your environment because you can't trust it, you need to put it back together. That's a horrible thing to consider when you've got thousands and thousands of devices. But if that's all you've got and you've got faith in your backups, that may be the only option you're presented with. Religious patch management. You got to patch, okay? And not just Microsoft. We're talking about everything. And some vendors are horrible at delivering patches, especially on these little Internet of Things devices that populate so many of our networks. The only advice I would offer with those is don't trust them, segregate them out to some other VLAN and block everything with ACLs between them, and even shove them out a different network path if you can. Don't let those things dirty up your environment, because that's what they are. We rarely see patches delivered from any of those vendors. It's not because they don't care. I think they do care, but their main focus is functionality, not overall security. Plan to fail. Have your incident response plan. As Gavin mentioned, know who to call, who's on your side, who's on your team. And when you call law enforcement, already be aware that they're not there to fix anything. They're just there to observe and look for somebody to arrest. Train is obviously important. Testing people through various efforts such as phishing campaigns and things of that nature. And obviously, I don't think you need to be told not to click on things that you're not aware of. Passwords. We've been talking about this forever. Microsoft announced the other day that they're embracing this passwordless environment. If you haven't read up on that, go read about it and then go throw up after you get through reading it, because it'll frighten you. The only thing we know about passwords, other than for the foreseeable future they're likely to be a necessary evil, is the longer they are, the better they are. And one of the ways that we try to commit users to this idea is we don't call them passwords anymore. What do we call them? Passphrases. Yeah, passphrases. And we even give them some really cool ideas of how to deal with that. Sing the lyrics of a song, or if you want to go out to Applebee's and no, but come on now, y'all know what I'm talking about. Anybody want to sing the song? Rusty, you want to sing with me? Yeah, we'll karaoke that Applebee song, Rusty. Nobody wants. That's an Alabama guy that sings that song, right? Yeah. All right. Use the password. Change the passwords frequently. There used to be sort of a pseudo requirement through NIST to change your passwords, but once two-factor became more common, that's not necessarily being embraced any longer. And obviously monitor things and pay attention to things that go on. Just from a research perspective, here's an eye chart if you're curious about what password length can do for you. There are a lot of tools to crack these things, and on the left-hand side, you've got the password length in characters, and then the possible number of combinations, and then the length of time that it takes some modern computing devices to crack those. So, if you got a 12-character long password, it'll take a machine around 1.5 years right now to break it. If you're really into password management, go after that 18-character password, and if anybody gets through that one, they probably know you extremely well. They know the songs that you're singing. Here's some tools that I used a couple of weeks ago that are online just to further illustrate you don't have to really know how to do these things. I had a hash table, some encrypted, if you will, password tables. And here are two sites that are bad guys on demand, so to speak. You create an account and upload your tables to them, and they crack the passwords for you. And this first site, it took 20 hours to crack it. They only charged me 18 bucks. 11 million passwords were dumped out of that thing. The second one was about $4. This one is hard to get to. It became very popular. Nobody's really confident where this engine came from because they were using a super high compute node that looked like it was incredibly too expensive for just some dudes to stand up inside of Amazon. So there are some thoughts that Coalfire may have been a nation state sponsored environment. And if you're looking for any sort of password management suggestions, NIST of course has a document. I like the NIST effort, but NIST has a document for everything. And if you have time to read through those things, you have got a lot of time on your hands. The latest revision of NIST 800-171, which a lot of agencies that do business with the federal government have to be compliant with, it's over 1,000 control statements. That's a lot of stuff to be compliant with. COVID-19 has reshaped a lot of this, primarily because there were lots of people working from home, and there's that fear factor that could be played into the various opportunities. Google offered an interesting statistic that you can see there on the screen. They're processing 240 million daily COVID-19 spam messages. My first thought about that when I read that little white paper they released was, well, if you can identify the damn things, why aren't you blocking them? But I don't work at Google, so I don't know the answer to that, but that was in the white paper. Phishing is up nearly 700% since the beginning of COVID. FBI is seeing a lot of attacks. I mean, just all sorts of bad things are up because people are working from home and there's a lot more opportunity. Business email compromise, how does this affect you all? It's obviously a big problem. Once your business email is compromised, people can impersonate you. They can pretend to be you. They can contact coworkers and peers within the organization. And that trust relationship is there. And all of the security awareness tools and training that you put in front of people go out the door if you have a busted internal account. Because what do we tell people? Oh, look for the weird domain names, look for the odd things, look for the non-domains that we don't do business with. Well, one of your accounts gets busted and people are using it to try to submit fake invoices, to ferry money around internally. This becomes a substantial issue that's difficult to challenge. A few comments about some good ideas on what to do to avoid business email compromise. Free email systems for small businesses. I hope none of the folks here in the room are doing that, but if you're running a business and you tell people to contact you at your Gmail account, yes, that's not good. Or if you have employees who don't want to use the corporate email environment, maybe you're an Office 365 shop, but they love Google, and they're doing business with their Google account. Not only is that a legal issue, because perhaps if there's some sort of legal process that requires capturing of data, that's outside of your domain of responsibility. That's another issue to deal with, but it erodes the trust relationship that you put into all of your systems by having one person that decides to kind of go rogue. Plus, there's a professional piece. It just doesn't look right nowadays. It looks very odd and unprofessional. Typo squatting. This one's really common. I did this at a conference 4 or 5 months ago. The conference organizer said, I want you to fish everybody that's attending this thing, including the vendors. Send me the Excel spreadsheet, and I'm kind of contemplating, what am I going to do? And this particular organization's domain name was really long, and they tried to They apparently wanted something shorter, but they were too late to buy it. So they went with this domain name that was just outrageous. Well, you know, it was easy to find one similar. If you've got a 14-character domain name, somebody can just change an O to a 0 or something like that, and it looks very similar. So I registered a domain that looked similar to that one and spun up a little email server and just started sending stuff out. That was probably the best phishing campaign that I've ever had. It was almost 100%. There were literally 4 people that didn't click. And I found out later that 2 of those weren't even supposed to be registered. It was carryover artifacts from the spreadsheet from the year before. So typo, what do you do with this one? I mean, there is an obvious thing. You can go out and register those domains and take control of them. Or you can search for them. Perhaps somebody's already stalking you, and the way you can find out is by looking for similar domain names as what you have. And then the obvious other things, people overshare in every aspect of our lives, social media stuff. One of my favorites is LinkedIn. I don't have anything on LinkedIn for me, but I like going out there if we're doing some kind of work, especially if it's a blind study. You know, some companies will come in and say, we're not going to tell you anything about our company. You got to figure it all out from the outside. It's total black box. The easiest way to find out what's going on inside that organization is go to social media sites, especially LinkedIn, and look for people who work there or people who used to work there. And they'll very happily tell you, I am running the following products at this organization, and I am certified in this. And within 30 minutes, you can build up a kind of a composite of what technologies are within that organization and use that to fine-tune what's going on with your attack. And out of office responders, not a fan of those. I know people like to use them when they go on vacation or something like that, but that lets people know you're not there. And if they want to impersonate you, well, you just gave them a good opportunity to do that. Multi-factor, I talked about that a few moments ago. All right, so what else can we do to help mitigate these attacks? Well, I don't know if you can see this. This has been on the internet for a while, but this fellow was a security guard at this company, and he didn't see a lot of action. So he got a picture of a very intimidating security guard and put it in front of him while he slept. Not very effective if there's a real robbery, but for his purposes, it worked really well. The reason for this slide is things only work if you use them correctly. Going to any of the vendors and working with Howard as a VAR to get these tools, if they're not set up properly, if they're not managed, if they're not monitored, that's bad news. So the idea of kind of shiny object syndrome becomes a little bit of a problem in some organizations. They'll buy things and forget about them. They don't patch them, they don't upgrade them, whatever the case may be. Backups, obviously that can be a big protector against ransomware and physical disasters such as natural issues and things of that nature. I am a fanatic about 2 things in our IT shop at Troy. Number one is backups. Some people accuse me of wasting money. Some people think I'm just got some sort of issue with my head when it comes to backups, but we follow this 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of everything every day to 2 different types of media, and we ferry it off site in an air-gapped environment as well. If you read in the paper that Troy University could not put themselves back together, you need to run like hell, because we back up and we back up and we back up and we back up. We've got backups of the backups of the backups. And with some of our cloud-based products, we purposefully created geographical diversity in them where around 2 o'clock in the morning, the backup facilities are backed up to another part of the planet. So I don't want to be that person on the front page of the paper that says I couldn't put all this back together again. Okay, there's got to be a better excuse for me. You know, I got shot or something, you know, but whatever the case may be. So the other thing that I'm fanatical about is being reviewed from a security perspective. And I think Gavin, or I think you mentioned it. Everybody has their own specific approach to this, even if you're following kind of the layered security model, but everybody has a different flair for what they're good at reviewing. We use multiple auditors in our environment, and they all find something different. Now, ordinarily that would frighten, because the idea is kind of comes from the financial side of the house. If you have financial auditors come in and they're looking for missing money or something, they ought to be able to find out, no matter who they are, find the exact same thing. That's not the case with any of this technology. You may ask a company to come in and do a risk assessment on the edge of your network, and then ask another company to do the exact same thing. Chances are they are going to find different things. So my preference is to take those multiple audits and reviews and put them on top of each other and look for the areas of overlap and distinction. That's my high priorities. Those are the ones that are most obvious, and then we start working our way through the list after that. Patch. Patching is great, but you got to have a plan. You can't patch what you don't know about. So if you use the SIS critical control set as a framework in your environment, you know that statement number 1 is inventory. You got to know what's in your environment. That's perhaps obvious, but the reason for it is to be able to patch it, to be able to properly manage that environment. Then obviously stepping through these other things are more mechanical. Identify the patches, schedule them, test them. You got to do that with all of the operating system patches in particular, because blindly installing those things could lead to some unintended and unwanted consequences. Be able to roll them back, things of that nature. 9 out of 10 breaches last year could have been prevented by a quality patch management program. That's a scary statistic. Shodan will reveal this. You can go out and search for unpatched vulnerabilities through Shodan, and it will show you in the Microsoft environment the patches that are missing from Windows servers that are publicly facing. Patch it. It won't show up on Shodan at a minimum. 2FA, multi-factor. This one's obvious if you're not using it. And I'm not talking about just in the email environment. Those of you that are network administrators, if you don't have 2-factor running across your gear, you're not following best practices either. 2-factor everything. Tools are changing. AV is not just AV anymore. The idea of using signature-based AV works for things that probably predate 2005. But since things have become polymorphic and more advanced, the idea of heuristics scanning is, it's all right. But you need things that are more behavior-based and use some of these wonderful new terms we've got: machine learning and artificial intelligence and those sorts of things, where there are behavioral analytics running that look not only for signatures of bad things, but bad behavior that are indicative of bad things and attempt to block or shun that type of activity. Plan to fail well. Well, you know, you got to expect this to happen to you. And if it does, what are you going to do? That's where your incident response plan comes in play. If you have an incident response plan, great. If you've never tested your incident response plan, that's not good. That's synonymous with, to me, with not testing your backups. I'm filled with stories. I think, I don't know who I was talking to. Somebody asked me this the other night, but I figured it up. I have testified over 1,000 times in cybersecurity court cases and various forensic stuff. And in many of those, the question would often be, what was lacking? Not testing backups was the most common. I worked with a government agency in Alabama a few years ago. Some of the folks here with me were there as well. We walk into that environment, they have been ransomed. It's a nightmare. I noticed that the system engineering and system admin folks were very quiet. Everybody else was screaming and shouting and having a fit. I didn't understand why these dudes were very quiet. So walked over to them and had a little conversation. We quickly realized they did not know if they could restore any data because they had never tested a restore of their backup solution. We went and tested the product. The software was writing a .toc file religiously every night to their disk-to-disk backup solution. And that table of contents file had no associated data. It was writing a directory with no data every single night. Across town, they had a hot backup facility that was robust. We went to it just hoping there would be something there. They had had a power outage that within 6 months, and nobody went over to visit the place. It had melted the transfer switch and the entire room was dead. They had a third backup solution with a company based out of New Jersey that was supposed to be doing a file system snapshot every night of their SANs. And that company had the wrong contact information for a previous person that had been a sysadmin at this government agency. They had been trying to tell them through email that their backups weren't working. There are lots of failures in this whole process, the least of which was how the bad guys got in and ransomed this environment. Their Active Directory, primary Active Directory server had RDP turned on to the public because the dude in charge of AD just did not want to get in his truck and go to work. So lots of problems. What did they do? The FBI was there and said, don't pay the ransom. They paid the ransom, I assure you. We were buying Bitcoin all night with credit cards to try to get up enough money to pay the ransom, and they got their data back. So test these things. You got to be able to review and inspect what you expect. Security awareness training programs, obviously this can be effective, but it has to have a little bit of teeth to it. If your policy tells someone they should not click on links and they click on links and all you do is tell them stop doing that, that's not effective. There has to be some follow-up, some progressive activity to instill in people that this is important and that there are consequences to poor decisions. Engage experts. There are lots of them out there. You can find plenty at this conference, and have some cyber liability insurance. You need to understand cyber liability coverage because it is complicated. It doesn't always do what people expect it to do. So there's lots of concerns about it. So you need to make sure you understand your policy. And communication. The cadence of communication with any sort of crisis is important. If it becomes public, which nearly 3/4 of all cyber attacks are made public because the bad guys have made it public. It's more important than ever that you have someone that is the single belly button that people can interact with. Either that's a PR firm or that's your PR person or whomever you designate, so they have a consistent answer. There's a reason why the White House has one person talking to the press every day. You may not like that person, you may love that person, it doesn't matter. The cadence is the same person, same times every day. So if you find yourself in a protracted environment or protracted engagement where you're having to talk to the media and other people over a consistent period of time, schedule these things at the same time, same person, same format. And that eliminates a lot of possibility for conjecture and all sorts of oddball guessing. If all else fails, lawyer up. The lawyers are there for a reason. Typically is to give you the answer, it depends. That's the legal advice you typically hear, right? You spend $400 an hour and the answer is, well, it depends. But the legal team can save you, especially if you're in an environment that's heavily regulated from a regulatory perspective. Healthcare as an example, banking. So you need to talk to your attorney and make sure that things are running properly through those folks. Waiting for things to be perfect is not going to happen. So just get started and hope that continuous improvement works in your favor. I think I am on the last slide. Let me find the last slide. Yep. External penetration test. It doesn't look like that. Yeah, I look like a fool here trying to use this touchscreen. I don't know if it's because I'm left-handed and I'm trying to use my right hand or what, but in reality, what we're looking for penetration testing is a structured engagement to explore, do risk analysis and look for issues. And lastly, first line of defense from cyber threats is official organization, because statistically we know that nearly 55% of the bad activity is coming in through that vector. So if you're not quizzing your employees or your staff, this is probably the best thing to start with. Kind of stayed on time. Any questions? Yes.
So I've created our employee training session. It does a good job of scaring the hell out of them and make them not want to ever click anything again. Problem is testing. what's your recommendation? Try to do internal testing, or are there good firms out there, especially for small businesses, small colleges that we can actually afford to?
Yeah, there are a lot of firms, but you can stand up stuff relatively easily yourself. I mean, ideally, what you would do is just a lightweight web server internally. You can do some DNS masquerading. That's not going to cost you anything. Send out the message, and you can look at the logs on the web server to determine what the level of activity is. There's some free tools. You have my email address is on one of these slides. But just shoot me a note and I'll send you a list of the free tools that some of them we use. One last thing, though, I know I said I was through, but on the screen, this is an interesting tool that we had a vendor come in and demo a couple of years ago to us. And they spent a week installing this hardware, and we went for the great big reveal. And this is what was displayed on the screen. And they started manipulating this image and rotating this live activity map of our network. I didn't understand what I was looking at. I kept asking the guy, what does this have to do with securing my environment? Well, you can see how every device is connected to every device. Okay, helps us count, helps us do an inventory. That was literally all this tool would do. Now, Howard did not bring this tool in, just for full disclosure. It was another company that thought this was a good idea. So be careful with what you're taking a look at. Make sure the proof of concepts are satisfying your notions and is filling a void within your security armor. Things like this, we call these pew pew maps. Some people get upset about that, but the pew pew map, I don't know how helpful that is. If you need to impress some people that wear suits every day and stuff like that, maybe that's helpful. But looking at a spider web may not be the best tool to put in your arsenal. The last statistic on this slide is probably the most frightening. In 2020, when breaches were discovered, on average, the bad guys had been in the network for 208 days before they were detected. All right. That is literally it. There we go. Thank you.
No comment.
Okay, good deal, good deal. Wow, well, those were some great best practices, and thank you, Greg, for your expertise and guidance. That was really, really good. Okay. All right, guys, so we're very fortunate to have one final guest speaker today, and we're thrilled to have Mr. Ed Antonucci with us. Ed is with CRC, and I'm just going to read a little background on Ed real quick. So Ed's a director in the professional services group at Wholesale Insurance Brokerage CRC. He helps retail insurance agents secure insurance for their clients. In addition to his brokering duties, Ed is a member of CRC Professional Advisory Group and part of the Private Directors and Officers Liability Specialty Team. Prior to spending the last 25 years as a wholesale insurance broker, Ed spent 10 years as an underwriter at AIG. Within the insurance industry, Ed has served on the board of the Plus Midwest chapter and was a founding member of Plus Shots for Charity. Currently, Ed lives in the northwest suburbs of Chicago with his wife and 2 boys and volunteers at Northwest Charters Hockey Association. Would you please join us at this time, Ed? Thank you.
You.
Well, I don't have a slide presentation because I'm from New York and I'm Italian, so it's a acting presentation. So you don't have to worry about slides. Unfortunately, or fortunately for you guys, this will be quick because the doctor did a great job of the stuff he put up there on the screen, and a lot of stats and a lot of stuff he talked about was kind of what I wanted to talk about and see what's going on in the world of insurance. I can tell you right now, from the world of insurance, you guys in this room probably know a lot more than the underwriters do. The cyber insurance product is a very new product that the underwriters are still trying to get their hands on. as the doctor mentioned earlier, this started out, it was very easy. You got a web address, you had a physical address, maybe discussion of the class of business, revenues. You plugged it into a system, you came up with a quote. They even asked maybe for PII. Then eventually got rid of PII. Carriers were coming in and they were doing it all online. Great, 5 questions, get a quote, not a problem, not an issue. The only issue that was looked at that point was social engineering. So if you need a big social engineering limit, you didn't get it. It was limited at maybe $500,000, 250, went down to 150. That was their biggest concern. They looked at larger companies and they probably underwrote them a little more closely than smaller companies. But then as larger companies got smarter with what was going on with threat actors and they became better at protecting themselves, that didn't become an issue. And everything was running along smoothly. COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, claims started coming in. What types of claims? What was happening? Well, we started seeing an increase in ransomware. You saw the slides that the doctor put up. Now, my numbers, I believe, what was your number on the ransomware? Was it 400, 500, something like that, 500,000, maybe the average cost? 100. I have numbers that show that average ransomware cost that some of the underwriters were seeing were 1.2 million on the average ransomware demand. We also had the average funds transfer loss of about $326,000. So as we got hit, as the underwriting community got hit with business interruption losses, contingent business interruption losses, supply chain losses, ransomware, they had to do something about it. And unfortunately, if anybody in this room was involved in the colonoscopy this year, the purchasing of insurance this year, it was a problem. And it will continue to be a problem because I don't see it changing anytime soon. The average rate increase, people tell me with 25%, I can tell you on the accounts I have was anywhere from 50% and higher. I've seen retentions going from 5,000 to 25,000, 50,000. Again, as mentioned, I probably should have did this in conjunction with the doctor when we talked about this because a lot of stuff was on the slides I could have just kind of added on to. The types of businesses being hit, again, hospitals, public entity business, school business, a lot of people are in this room. So the carriers started looking at that. And they just, I don't think they really know how to handle what's going on. So what we're seeing, besides these rate increases and retention increases, we're starting to even see pullback on coverages. Ransomware sublimits in some cases. Pulling back on the contingent business interruption. Additional applications, yes. You mentioned a 25-page application, correct. We're seeing larger applications along with ransomware applications have to be filled out before the underwriters will look at it. So the underwriters right now will sit there, and why I want to kind of tie this all together is they're going to look at your class of business, they're going to look at your size, they're going to look at, biggest thing is they're going to look at is the controls. And that's what we hear talking about. That's what the presentators out in the room are talking about, the controls. The underwriters want to see you put these controls in place. So is insurance out there to offset this? No, insurance is out there to work in conjunction with the controls that you guys are putting in place. And I can tell you right now, if you don't have those controls in place, you're not going to get insurance. You will not get insurance. And the smaller, medium-sized business are the guys that need it. And those are the ones that are struggling right now to find insurance. So the controls that the underwriters want you to look at, and that, again, we've been talking about, they're presenting about, is they want to make sure you have MFA. That's the big thing. The doctor's slides had MFA, I think, bolded four different sections. They want to see MFA not only for any remote access to the system, really for emails, for admin accounts, and for billing. That's one thing they'll look at. The second thing they want to make sure is you have a great, you run your endpoint detection and response. They feel that that's a great way to protect the company and to detect bad actors out there. If you don't have the EDP in place, they're going to look back at maybe not providing insurance to you. The third thing they want to look at is segregated backups, segregated from main network, and also at multiple locations. These are all questions in the application that you're going to have to answer, and these are all questions that the owners are going to very quickly and in detail look at before they provide insurance. Remote desktop protocols, yes, close them. If you're not going to close them, put it behind a firewall. Have some VPN. Again, underwriters are not the most intelligent people. They're being told by the knowledgeable people behind the scenes of what they should be looking for and what they have to tell me as a broker and what I have to tell you as a client. They run, if you've ever seen a scan, they run their scans. Different underwriters run different scans. They come up with a scan score. They come up with a report to tell you what's going on out there, but they don't share that information in full detail. We have some scans we do at CRC that we can help and maybe show you where the underwriters think you have exposure. But for the most part, you're kind of on your own. That's why you need the protection of all the vendors that are out there in the system, because those protections will help you get insurance in the future. Where I feel this is going, that's a great question. I've had some discussions with people in the past about this. I'm not sure if this is insurable in the future, especially ransomware. There are a lot of protective mechanisms out there, but there are a lot of bad actors. The bad actors are staying one step ahead of the protection mechanisms that are out there. People can't keep paying this ransomware, and it can't keep falling back on the insurance sector, because I can tell you, there is not enough money built up right now in the insurance sector to pay for the claims that are out there. So pretty soon, I just don't know how this is going to play out. Anybody I've talked to right now, they're expecting the cyber situation, the cyber insurance situation to be worse next year. I don't know how much worse it could be than what it was this year. Again, if you went through the renewal, you'll see it was really tough. I got accounts out there I can't get insurance for until they get certain controls put in place. I have some public entity business that pricing, $500,000 for large retirement systems. It's a scary proposition right now, and it's worse, as you can tell, if you don't have the insurance. But if you can at least get the insurance to provide back-end protection and pay for some of the stuff that you're paying for upfront to protect yourself, that might be necessary as it goes down. So the way I look at the insurance business right now for cyber, it's new. It's concerning to the underwriters. It's necessary. Gavin talked about all your people have to have cyber insurance. It's not an if, it's not a when. You feel the doctor saw an application needs cyber insurance. It's definitely something that's needed, but it's not going to be obtained until you get the protecting mechanisms in force that the carrier is looking for. The other stuff I wanted to talk about have all been hit, so there's not really much more I can add to that. But welcome to make them more interactive as far as what you're looking for in insurance or what you're expecting insurance to do. So if you have any questions on that, I'll be free to answer.
Some insurance companies will not share their screen data.
Most.
Why won't they?
Why won't they? They feel it's proprietary information that they've paid for. So they'll give you ancillary information that's out there, but they won't really get into details about why you are not secured correctly for them. So we have something called CyberRight, where we put in the revenues, the class of business, the website, and that report will come back, and hopefully we're using that to kind of give you some guidance as to what the carriers are looking at and are concerned about.
So if a carrier does underwrite you, would it behoove them to share that data so that we could correct that?
It should, and that's the next step that we're getting carriers to do. Unfortunately, in some situations, some carriers are charging for it, but we do have some carriers who will come up and say, yeah, we'll get you in contact with our internal people, and they'll help you or guide you in a way to make yourself insurable. Now, some of the bigger companies. There's a company in London, Volante, and I can't remember what they use as a third-party resource. But they've quoted some tougher accounts, bigger accounts. And just an example of what's going on. They've quoted an account for me, it was like a $200,000 account, but in order to buy it at $200,000, you had to buy their protection, which was another $150,000 a year. Now, that's what we're trying to avoid. That's what we're trying to get more carriers who are more than willing to say, we'll get you in contact with our third-party people. They'll help you get to the right place, right frame, and then we can provide insurance. Again, I represent, and I was sitting with Gavin all day, so people might say, well, insurance, he had a slide up. He didn't really like insurance companies. I'm not the insurance company. I'm the insurance broker. I represent multiple companies. So yes, there are some companies who aren't the best out there at what they're doing, and there are some that are very good and will interact and work with you. In the world I came from was the D&O insurance world. Our renewals, on larger renewals, we would have a meeting room, probably 2 tables long like this, 25 underwriters represented, and we go through the renewal process, ask a lot of questions, and then somebody would come back and quote. We never got to that with cyber. Now we're doing that with cyber. Now we're getting to accounts where we have to sit there and get on a phone with 6 or 7 carriers, have all these questions answered to see where we can get an answer, because nobody wants to sit there and answer 25 cyber questions from this carrier, 25 from that, 25 from that. I don't want to do it. So we're starting to have multi-insurance carrier meetings with potential buyers. Any other questions? I told you it's gonna be quick because there's a lot of great stuff put up there. If you didn't see those slides, if those slides are available, I would love to have those slides. That would be great because I can utilize a lot of that in our sales piece. But it's definitely, I mean, it's 2 people who are up here already talked about how they bought cyber insurance. It's needed. It is needed. It's not going to do everything for everybody. It's going to depend on the carrier, but it's definitely an insurance that is needed. It's not a throwaway insurance. Any other questions? All right. Did I keep it in time? Did I keep the time frame until 1? All right. I know I had a little bit of time there.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Ed. That's so good to know that now we have some place to go for any advice or consultation when it comes to insurance. So thank you so much. It's good information. So guys, that was a pretty impressive group of 3, wouldn't you say? Let's give them a round of applause.